Hey everybody! Welcome back to the True Crime Sisters channel. Today we are going to be talking about the Freeway Killer, and his name was William Bonin. And full disclosure, we recorded this one yesterday and went to watch it back and there was no audio. So
super frustrating.
Yeah, so this is the second time we were recording it. But I also wanted to add that in the first video, I was not looking at the ceiling.
And I was not sleeping.
When we watched it back, I was noticing that, I kept, looking up, but I was not looking at the ceiling, I promise. And she was, wide awake-ish.
I was wide awake. It just appeared that I was sleeping.
Yes.
But, yeah. No.
So, alright, well, let's get into this.
Because it's a long one.
Crazy.
Also,
trigger warning.
Yeah, definitely.
There is a lot of sexual assault and just abuse in general. Yeah. And
he's kind of crazy.
He did a lot more to his victims than we put in here.
Right.
I mean, he did extensive...
As far as torture goes.
Yeah.
He went all out.
Yeah, he did extensive torture. And, it was not always the same, but it was always crazy. And we just kind of, summed that up instead of going through every single thing that he did because it's a lot.
Right.
So...
The Freeway Killer. William Bonin. Bonin, right?
Yeah.
William was born in Connecticut on January 8th, 1947. He was the middle child of two brothers. His parents were Robert and Alice Bonin, who were both alcoholics. The Bonin children suffered constant abuse and neglect. They were often left in the care of Alice's father, who was a convicted child molester and continued a sexual abuse on William and his brothers. When William was 6 years old, Alice sent him and his brothers to an orphanage. According to her, she did this to protect them from her father. However, at the orphanage, they were also abused and molested. William stayed there until he was 9 years old. The following year, he was sent to juvenile detention center for stealing license plates. And again, he was abused and sexually assaulted there as well. After a few years there, he moved back with his family and they decided to move to California. After the move, his father passed away due to cirrhosis of the liver. At age 14, Williams began sexually assaulting children in the neighborhood as well as his brothers. He graduated high school in 1965, and shortly after he proposed to his girlfriend before joining the U.S. Air Force, serving in the Vietnam War. He was awarded a Good Conduct Medal. However, during this time in the military, he raped 2 soldiers at gunpoint, and apparently this crime was never reported. He was honorably discharged in 1968 and returned home to live with his mother and his wife. However, his marriage ended shortly after getting married.
It's crazy that his mom, she sent them to the orphanage to be protected from her father. However, she was the one that was leaving the children with her father, the entire time. So
it's she kind of had to know something was going on.
Yeah, well, I saw that, I read somewhere else that she was also abused by her father. So, obviously she knew what was going on. So, I mean, and they didn't go into a better situation either, fortunately.
And then how he was awarded a good conduct medal, then
did not deserve that even
right.
In the slightest.
But then again, that wasn't reported.
Yeah.
He just later admitted to that.
Yeah. Which I feel like, just from hearing different stories and stuff, military, like, abuse and, like, sexual assault and stuff is pretty common in the military, and it seems like
unfortunately
it's rare that it gets reported because,
yeah.
I mean, we've all heard the stories of the cover-ups and,
Yeah.
So, at age 21, he sexually assaulted a minor and continued over the next 4 months assaulting and abusing children in his neighborhood. In 1969, William was arrested and convicted of kidnapping and sexual assault. He was then sent to a hospital to be treated, where it was revealed that he had a higher than average IQ. Doctors said that he had damage to his frontal cortex and suffered from depression. However, after 2 years of being in the hospital, it was ruled that he could not be treated, so they sent him to prison. And this decision was likely due to the fact that he had been raping the other patients. And a year later, in 1974, he was released after doctors concluded he was no longer a threat to others. Which really just pisses me off. I mean, they didn't want him in the hospital because he was abusing the other patients, and then a year later they're like, yeah, that was probably just a one-time thing, so you can go home now.
And then we talked about this before, but the frontal damage of the cortex was like something that was common in serial killers.
Yeah.
It can never be like proven that's
it's like a true thing, but yeah, I feel like we see that a lot. They have like a concussion or they were abused or something, and it really seems to like affect them severely.
Right.
So a few months later, in September of 1975, William sees 14-year-old David McVicker hitchhiking, and he offers David a ride. During the car ride, William asks David if he is gay, and this makes David uncomfortable, so he asks him to pull over so he can get out. William threatens him with a gun and then drives him to a field where he rapes and beats him. He then takes David home, and obviously David immediately tells his parents what happened, and they call police. William was arrested and charged with the rape of a minor, and he was also charged with abduction of another minor, a 15-year-old, that had happened 2 days after he assaulted David. And he was sentenced to 1 to 15 years. He spent 4 years in prison and was released in 1978 with 18 months probation. He then moved to Downey, California, where he found work as a truck driver. He made friends with his neighbors and started hosting parties. William would supply alcohol and drugs and attempt to lure teenage boys to his apartment. And during this time, he meets 43-year-old Everett Frazier, who was also pretty popular in the neighborhood, and he was known for kind of the party lifestyle. And while attending one of Everett's parties, he meets 21-year-old Vernon Butts and 18-year-old Gregory Miley. Gregory Miley did odd jobs here and there to make a bit of money. He was described as illiterate with an IQ of 56, And Vernon Butts was a factory worker and part-time magician. So that's an interesting occupation. But also, to go back to his sentencing, like 1 to 15 years is just like a really crazy span.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if...
You usually hear like 10 to 15 years.
Yeah,
Like
there's
that.
obviously like usually just like a 5-year gap or something.
Right.
But, I mean, the fact that he was charged with 2, pretty serious crimes and only spent 4 years. I wonder how that relates to now. Like, if he were to commit these crimes now, I wonder if that's still, like, equivalent to what he would get. I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out, though. Because I wonder if it was a lot less back, if you'd get a lot more now. I mean, I would hope so.
Maybe.
4 years for, like...
I would think so.
Abduction and, like, rape of 2 separate children, like...
And then again, I guess every case is
Yeah.
different. Unfortunately, some people
But-
don't get...
I know.
Enough.
And if you think about it, like, had they given him more, a lot of these people that you'll find out he's about ready to kill would have been...
Yeah. There's a long list.
Yeah.
So, on May 28th, 1979, William picked up a hitchhiker that was a 13-year-old named Thomas Lundgren. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's how
Lundgren?
I would say it, too.
William offered him a ride and drove Thomas to a secluded location where he raped him. William then slashed his throat and strangled him with his t-shirt. William did not act alone in this murder, though. He was assisted by Vernon. A few months later, William is arrested for molesting a 17-year-old boy. This was a violation of his current parole as well. However, due to some sort of administrative error, he was released and Everett picked him up from jail. Everett later recalls that while they were in the car, William told him, quote, no one's going to testify again. This is never going to happen to me again, end quote. And at this time, Everett thought William meant that he's just done with these type of crimes. But in hindsight, though, William just meant that he was determined that he would not get caught again. To ensure he wouldn't get caught, he removed all the handles on the inside of his van except for the driver's side. He also came equipped with ropes, knives, and various household tools that he would need to capture or torture his victims with. And on August 4th, 1979, William and Vernon abducted a 17-year-old named Mark Sheldon. Mark had been walking to a nearby movie theater to hang out with his friends. They raped and tortured him and then threw his body out of the van onto a highway.
And, like, it just makes me so mad that he didn't serve any time for this. And it really confuses me because probation or no probation, I mean, molesting a 17-year-old is a crime, whether you're on probation or not. So I don't understand, like, who cares if they didn't know that he was on probation? That he still should have been charged with a crime no matter what. I don't understand how that even slipped through. Like, regardless of parole, I mean...
That's where the system kind of fails.
Yeah.
That's where they say, like, the system failed us. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely did in that case.
Yes. So the very next day, William and Vernon see 17-year-old Marcus Graves hitchhiking on a highway. They tie him up and take him to William's house, where they both proceed to rape him, and they stab him 77 times. The next morning, Marcus's body was found in Malibu Creek. On August 27th, William and Vernon abduct a 15-year-old named Donald Hayden. They rape and severely beat him and throw him in a dumpster where construction workers actually found him the next morning. On September 9th, William and Vernon abduct 17-year-old David Murillo. They rape and beat him before throwing his body over an embankment alongside a highway. September 17th, which is 8 days later, the two men abduct 18-year-old Robert Wirostek. I don't know how to say that. 18-year-old Robert, who was on his way to work. They beat and raped him, and his body was discovered alongside of a highway. The next known victim was abducted on November 1st. And it's unknown why they stopped for a few months, if, they even did, in fact, stop. But this victim is unidentified. They estimated his age to be between 19 and 25 years old, and his body was discarded on a highway after being beaten and strangled. Later, William says that the victim was 23, and he admitted to putting an ice pick in the man's ear.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like at end of August through September, it was just like back to back.
I know.
Back. Like,
yeah,
geez.
It was like once, and I feel like it was once he got an accomplice.
Yeah, he
like,
felt more comfortable.
Like once he was able to gain an accomplice, they were just like, one after the other. Yeah, they just went for it.
So 4 weeks later, in December 1979, William went solo and abducted a 17-year-old boy named Frank Fox. Frank's body was found severely beaten 2 days later, discarded along Ortega Highway. 10 days later, a 15-year-old teenager named John Kilpatrick was abducted after leaving his house to hang out with some friends. His body was found on December 13th. However, his body was not identified until August 5th, 1980. And on January 1st, 1980, William beat and strangled a 16-year-old boy named Michael Francis. His body was found 2 days later, discarded along the highway, but he was not identified until March 24th of that year. On February 3rd, William and Gregory Miley drove to Hollywood looking for their next victim. They then spot 15-year-old Charles Miranda, who was hitchhiking on the Santa Monica Boulevard. Gregory later said that William and Charles then engaged in consensual sexual activity with Charles before William overpowers him and ties him up. They put Charles in the van, and William instructs Gregory to take Charles' wallet. William proceeds to rape Charles, and Gregory attempts to take a turn in raping him as well, but he is unable to perform. And this initially pisses Gregory off, and he starts stabbing Charles with whatever he could find laying around the van. William and Gregory continue to beat him, and then William strangles him before they dispose of his body in an alley. A few minutes after murdering Charles, William tells Gregory, quote, "I'm horny again. Let's go and do another one," end quote. I cannot get over that quote.
I know.
It's just like...
I know. We changed... what did we change? We changed... an erection to perform because that was uncomfy. But then we were like, well, we can't change.
And we can't change a quote.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So unfortunately.
Yeah. It's just so odd. They then see 12-year-old James Maccabee at a bus stop and are able to get him into the van by telling them they would take him to Disneyland. Gregory drove the van around while William got in the back of the van, where he proceeded to rape and beat the child. At some point, Gregory also gets in the back of the van, where he continues to beat James until William strangles him, and then they discard his body by a dumpster.
That's so sad. Like,
he's so
the
young.
kid, I know. And, like, I mean, then that just tells you, like, you know, of his innocence, I guess, that, like, they were like, they were like, we're going to Disneyland, and he's like, oh, okay. Like, that's so sad. So, on February 4th, William was arrested for violating his probation, and he remained in jail until March 4th. On March 14th, William abducts 18-year-old Ronald Gatlin as he is leaving a friend's house. William rapes and beats him before strangling him. His body was found the next day. On March 24th, William abducts 14-year-old Glenn Barker while he was hitchhiking to school. William rapes and strangles him, and then at 4 p.m. that exact same day, William picks up 14-year-old Russell Rue at a bus stop. He holds him captive for 8 hours and then discards both of the boys in Cleveland National Forest. And on an unknown date in March, William offers a ride home to 17-year-old William Ray Pooh. I don't know. I know. I would be really surprised if it was Pooh, but
I don't know either.
I don't either. But we are going to refer to him as Ray, so it's not confusing, and because he is in this whole thing more, so we'll refer to him as Ray. So he offers him a ride home after they leave a party that Everett Frazier had. And William asks the boy if he would like to engage in sexual activity. And this freaks Ray out, and he tries to get out of the van. William grabbed his shirt and pulled him back in. He told Ray that he enjoyed abducting and killing young boys, but that he wasn't going to kill him because they had been seen leaving the party together. So he just drove Ray home. But on March 24th, William and Ray get back together and abduct 15-year-old Harry Turner, who was a runaway. They offered him $20 for sex to get him into the van, and after raping the child, William tells Ray to beat him. Then they strangle him and dispose of his body at a factory. Such a weird turn of events, right?
Yeah, it's so confusing because Ray was going to be the victim.
Yeah.
Then he turns around and says, oh, this sounds like fun.
I know.
Let me join you.
And, like, he tries to, like...
I don't know, I can't even say, oh, maybe Ray was scared and felt compelled or something to join him, because Ray was safe at home at one point in time. And then they come back to get Ray.
Right.
Like,
and
hey.
They're like, let's go do this.
So he had plenty of opportunity to.
Yeah, and like he tried to like get out of the van. So like he was obviously freaked out at first.
Yeah,
and
I just don't know how you go from freaked out to
let me help you. Yeah, I don't know either. It was I don't know.
Super odd.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where they meet these friend groups, but
I know, and it really makes you wonder, like, is this how other like serial killers and stuff like meet their accomplices? Like, they go to kill them or something, and then they realize that they're one of them. Like,
oh yeah, you're
they're
pretty
in the
cool.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's weird.
it's insane. On April 10th, William abducts a 16-year-old Stephen Wood. Stephen was beaten and strangled, then his body was discarded in an alley. On April 29th, William and Vernon abduct 19-year-old Darren Kendrick. They get him into the van by telling him they would sell him some drugs. They take Darren to Vernon's house, where both men rape him, then force him to drink acid. Vernon then kills him by driving an ice pick into his ear. Darren's body was discarded behind a warehouse. And we said this before, like, the whole acid, like...
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where that came from, and, I mean...
Like, he was the only victim.
Yeah, as far as I know...
Drank acid.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, like, it's like, did they just have that... Or did I guess it was Vernon's house, so, like, did Vernon just, like, have acid just hanging around his house? And he's like, hey, let's try
I guess
this.
if you're a serial killer, then you would have just about anything laying around.
Yeah, I guess. So that is
maybe
true.
Maybe that makes sense at their house.
Yeah, I guess.
But on May 12th, William acts alone this time and abducts 17-year-old Lawrence Sharp. William had previously met Lawrence during one of Everett's parties. William raped Lawrence, then strangled him before tossing his body behind a gas station. On May 19th, William asked Vernon to accompany him on another killing. However, Vernon did not want to go. So William decides to act alone again and abducts 14-year-old Sean King from a bus stop. He murders Sean and discards his body. Then he goes to Vernon's house to brag about what he had just done.
Naturally.
Yeah.
I mean...
Sounds like a piece of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So on May 28th, William invites 18-year-old drifter James Monroe to his house. James was bisexual and begins a consensual sexual relationship with William. On June 1st, William tells James that he would like for the two of them to rape and murder a hitchhiker. And by this point, the freeway murders had gained a lot of media attention. There was a $50,000 reward up for grabs to find the perpetrator. And William thoroughly enjoyed all of the media attention. He collected all of the newspaper articles. And Ray had been arrested for auto theft on May 29th. And while listening to a radio station in jail, Ray hears details about some of the murders. And so he spoke with a counselor in jail and told them that William Bonin could be responsible for the crimes. And that information was then passed on to the LAPD homicide sergeant. And he went to the jail to personally speak with Ray. Ray told him everything he knew, except for the fact that he was involved in committing one of those murders.
Naturally.
Right, like, you gotta leave that part out.
Mm-hmm.
But around this same time, David McVicker, who was the 14-year-old that William had driven home from the party, had called police to say that he also believed that William Bonin was the Freeway Killer.
And police started investigating William, and they realized that he had an extensive criminal history when it came to assaulting teenage boys. So they decided to assign a team and start surveillance on William on June 2nd, 1980. On the same day, William and James abduct 18-year-old Stephen Wells from a bus stop. They offer him a ride, and during the ride, they all start chatting a little bit. and they learn that Stephen is bisexual. So they offer him $200 if they would allow the two of them to tie him up before engaging in sexual activity. The three decide to go to William's apartment, where they proceed to rape and beat Stephen. They inform Stephen that he is about to be murdered, and then they strangle him with his own t-shirt. The two men put his body inside a cardboard box and carried it to the van. Then they decide to go to Vernon's house to show him the body and ask his opinion on where to discard him. Vernon tells him that they should try to hide him behind a gas station. And Stephen's body was then found only 5 hours later. On June 11th, police spot William driving around Hollywood, and at this point he had already been unsuccessful in abducting 5 teenage boys at different times that day. But he had just abducted 17-year-old Harold Tate. Police followed William until he parked in an isolated parking lot. When police started to approach the van, they heard screaming coming from inside the van and quickly intervened as they forced the back van doors open and discovered William in the act of assaulting Harold.
William was arrested, and he was initially just charged with the rape of a minor, but he was also being held on suspicion of murder, and his bail was set at $250,000. James Monroe finds out that William had been arrested, so he steals William's car and flees to his home state of Michigan. Police search the van and find all of the weapons and supplies that he'd been using to commit the abductions and murders. They also find all of the newspaper clippings in his glove box, and they found that his van and his apartment had extreme amounts of blood stains. And of course, William initially denies everything. However, he changed his mind after reading a letter that was written by Sean King's mom, pleading for him to tell her where her son's body was so that she could have a proper burial for him. And over the next several days, William admitted to abducting, raping, and murdering 21 young boys. He also told them about each one of his accomplices and the roles that they played in the murders. Investigators say that he seemed very embarrassed that he got caught, but expressed no remorse at all. And William was able to be connected to many of the murders through hair samples, semen, carpet fibers from his van, and blood. And by July 29th, William was charged with 16 murder indictments, 11 counts of robbery, 1 count of sodomy, and 1 count of mayhem, and was being held without bond. Okay, so I Googled mayhem because I've heard it so many times. Like, you probably have too, you know. But apparently it's essentially mutilation. Like, that's what it means, is when you mutilate somebody.
Think of all the times that we use the word mayhem.
Yeah.
And here we've been using it inappropriately.
I know, because I guess I just thought it was like, you know, you're causing a ruckus. Like,
right.
Like, this is because people say this is mayhem, don't they?
I think so. I mean, I personally never have.
No, I don't think I've ever said it either. But, like, I think I've heard
that,
people.
But I've heard, I've heard it.
I wonder if, like, maybe it's spelled different, or if there could be just, like, 2 separate meanings. I don't know.
No.
But, yeah,
Google should have told you that.
I know.
Come on, Google. Get it together.
I know. I was kind of shocked about that, though. Learned something new.
Yeah. A reporter had once asked William what he'd be doing if he never got caught. And he said, quote, "I'd still be killing. I couldn't stop killing. It got easier with each one we did. End quote.
Nice.
I mean, I guess at least he wasn't lying.
Yeah. I mean,
it's kind of messed up.
Obviously, it got easier. That's why, like, they just,
at least he was pretty honest, like.
Yeah.
Police were able to obtain a warrant to search Vernon's apartment. They found some evidence that he was connected to some of the murders. Police arrested Vernon and charged him with 6 counts of murder and 3 counts of robbery. On July 31st, police went to Michigan to arrest James Monroe. He was brought back to California and he was charged with the murder of Stephen Wells. On August 22nd, Gregory Miley was arrested after he confessed to the murders with a friend over a recorded phone conversation that was turned into police. He was then charged with 2 murders. On January 2nd, Vernon was arraigned and entered his plea of not guilty, but just 4 days later, he ended up committing suicide in his cell.
Before William's trial began, Gregory and James agreed to testify against him in exchange for not receiving the death penalty. William's trial took place on November 5th, 1981. Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty for each count of murder. Gregory and James testified in graphic detail about the murders they accompanied William on. Several people in the court had to rush out because the details were so extreme. It was also stated that after the murder of Stephen Wells, they took the only money that Stephen had in his wallet, which was only $10, and they went to McDonald's to get hamburgers. And then William said, "Thanks, Stephen, wherever you are." The defense tried to excuse William's actions by referring to all that he had suffered in his childhood and requested for the jury to be more lenient due to this. But on January 6, 1982, the jury convicted William of 10 murders, but he was found not guilty of sodomy and mayhem. He was able to be cleared of the 1 count of murder and the 1 count of sodomy because he led police to where Sean King's body was, and the jury recommended he get the death penalty. Which, I really get confused as to why he was only charged with 1 count of sodomy in the first place. Because he literally sodomized each one of his victims.
So it seems like he took a plea deal in order to
for his
Sean King's body to be found. But then, what, after that, the jury recommended him get the death penalty?
Yeah, because the defense was trying to,
I thought once you got a plea deal,
Well, he only took the plea deal for 1 count of murder and 1 count of sodomy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was just for Sean King's case. So, which really doesn't mean anything in the whole scheme of things because he was still being convicted of 10 murders. But it's just the sodomy thing I don't understand because he sodomized all of his victims. How can, then they only charged him with 1? That was just weird to me. I feel like it should have been the same amount of murders.
Right.
Really.
Yeah, I agree.
What do I know?
The judge ordered for William to be sent to San Quentin prison to await execution by the gas chamber. William tried filing all the appeals he could, but each one was denied. While waiting for his death sentence, he became friends with other serial killers and also became pen pals with several different people, including some of the family members of the boys that he had murdered. William once wrote a letter to Sean King's mother that her son was his favorite because, quote, he was such a screamer, end quote. He also tried to tell people in these letters that Vernon was the ringleader and he was just following whatever Vernon said to do.
Right.
But I feel like if I was Sean King's mother, like, I'd be super upset to get that letter from him.
Right.
Like,
after all, like, after her having to, like, plead with him.
Yeah, and then you, like, make those details in the letter. Oh, he was such a screamer, like.
Yeah. So in 1992, California got rid of death by gas chamber. There was one other person who died in the gas chamber, and apparently he had started convulsing and it took him 4 minutes to die. So they switched to lethal injection. And William Bonin was executed by lethal injection on February 23rd, 1996. He was the first person to die by lethal injection in the state of California, and it took place 14 years after his first death sentence had been imposed. In an interview he gave the day before his execution, he said, quote, "They feel my death will bring closure, but that's not the case. They're going to find out." His last meal consisted of 2 large pizzas, 3 pints of ice cream, and 3 6-packs of Coke. And he was allowed to pick 5 people to spend his last hours with. Which is weird because I didn't know that you were even allowed to pick people. I mean, like, obviously everyone gets a last meal.
Some family members maybe, but up to 5?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then back up to, like,
the gas chamber.
The gas chamber, yeah. Like, wondering how long it, like, took for people to actually,
like,
die in the gas chamber, because they seem to think, like, 4 minutes was, or at least I'm assuming that's what they're saying, like, 4 minutes to die was like a little long.
I mean, it could have been like the convulsing maybe that kind of like turned them off on it. Yeah, but they said that it was inhumane. But I just feel like they could have brought it back just like one more time. Just
for William.
Yeah, just to throw William in there because
you know, he deserved that.
Yeah, he was not humane in the slightest, so
no.
I feel like that would have been deserving for him.
Right. So, none of William's family attended the execution. Some of the family members of the victims did attend the execution, though. He did not have any last words. However, he did leave a note which read, quote, "I feel the death penalty is not the answer to the problems at hand. I feel it sends the wrong message to the people of this country. Young people act as they see other people acting, instead of as people tell them to act. I would advise that when a person has a thought of doing anything serious against the law, that before they did it, they should go to a quiet place and think about it seriously." End quote.
Yeah. Because obviously he didn't do that.
No, he missed that part. He missed taking his own advice. But like before, I had mentioned to you when I read that, when I first seen that, I felt like maybe this was a message also relating to his parents, like, you know, like maybe he was angry that they didn't give him the proper guidance that he deserved, so he was kind of like trying to mention that in there. Like,
Yeah.
you know, young people act as they see others acting.
Yeah, and
he did kind of follow their footsteps.
Yeah.
Just took it to a whole nother level.
I mean, he a little went above and beyond, but
Right.
yeah. Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about that. And then when you said that, you know, that would actually kind of make sense a little bit.
Yeah. Doesn't excuse what he did.
No. But yeah,
just
that would make sense that he was kind of just calling them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
But, I mean, he should have had his quiet place, and then none of that would have happened.
Yeah, because I'm sure that would have helped.
Apparently to him, it would have.
I mean, maybe. Maybe.
Or he thinks it would have, at least.
Right.
It's such a weird thing to say, though.
Yeah.
Like, go to a quiet place and think about it seriously. But, you know, that it just, like, because he says, before and doing anything serious against the law, like, that just shows you that, like, you know, because who really cares about the law in this sense? Like, he was just murdering kids all the time. So, like, the law is really, like, the least of the concerns here. But to him, he didn't really care about people. He didn't really care about the people that he hurt. He only cared about being in trouble by the law.
Right. He was afraid to get caught.
Yeah. He didn't care about hurting people, the victims and their families, and he just cared about, you know, not getting caught.
Mm-hmm.
Which...
That's it.
Yeah.
It's usually what they all think about.
Yeah. So, that was the crazy story of William Bonin. And...
Make sure you guys, if you have any suggestions or opinions on this case, even list them in the comments below. We'd like to hear what you guys think about it.
Yeah. Or any information that we didn't know about it. And leave us some suggestions. Let us know what kind of cases or specific cases you would like us to talk about. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok also.
Yeah.
And comment or reach out on any of those and let us know your thoughts and case suggestions. We will see you guys next week.